AITA for stopping me from complaining about the bills because my neighbor bought a PlayStation instead of paying for water. I have been living with my roommate, Jake, for about a year now. We are not best friends or anything, but we get along well enough to share a space without wanting to kill each other. The deal has always been simple, rent and bills are split 50-50ths, and so far, that has worked just fine. We do not have any deep conversations or check in on each other's lives. It is a comfortable, neutral kind of cohabitation. He does his thing, I do mine, and as long as neither of us crosses any major boundaries, it works. Jake is not exactly what I would call financially responsible, but he has always managed to cover his share, even if it meant cutting it close sometimes. He has this habit of spending money on stupid things, limited edition sneakers he never wears, random gadgets he plays with for a week before forgetting about, overpriced takeout when we have a fully stocked fridge. It is like he sees money as something to burn through as fast as possible, like it physically hurts him to have a savings account. There are times I have watched him buy something ridiculous, like a $100 mechanical keyboard when he barely even uses his laptop, and thought, that's going to bite him in the ass later. But as long as he paid his half, I did not care. His bad decisions were not my problem. That changed last month. Our water bill came in, and Jake hit me with, "Hey man, I don't have it this month. Can you cover me?" Just like that. No lead up, no apology. Not even an attempt at a real excuse. I was caught off guard, so I just stared at him for a second, trying to process what he had just said. It was not like the water bill was some shocking new expense, we had been paying it every month without fail. So I asked him, "When do you think you'll be able to pay me back?" And this guy, without a hint of hesitation, just shrugged and said, "Soon." That was it. No real explanation, no plan, just soon. Annoying, but whatever. I covered it because, well, what else was I supposed to do? Let our water get shut off. It was not a huge amount of money, and while I was irritated, I figured it was a temporary situation. Maybe he had genuinely run into some bad luck. Maybe something had come up that he did not feel like explaining. I had known plenty of people who had the occasional tough month, so I did not push him on it. I paid the bill and moved on. I did not bring it up again because I figured he would get around to paying me back. He had never stiffed me before, so I assumed this was a one-time thing. Maybe he was just embarrassed. Maybe he was planning to hit me with a Venmo payment when his next paycheck came in. I let it slide, gave him the benefit of the doubt, and kept going about my life. Then, about a week later, I come home from work, exhausted and ready to just collapse onto the couch. I walk into the living room, and the first thing I see is a brand new PlayStation 5, still in the box, sitting on the coffee table. The sight of it does not fully register at first. I think my brain refuses to accept what I am looking at. And there is Jake, lounging on the couch, setting it up like it is just another normal day. I stand there for a good 5 seconds, just staring at the scene in front of me, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. The same guy who, 1 week ago, claimed he could not afford his half of the water bill, was now casually unpacking a console that cost upwards of $500. I look at the PS5. Then at him. Then back at the PS5. I feel my hands clench into fists at my sides. I ask him, "Dude, you didn't have money for the water bill, but you have money for this?" And this absolute idiot laughs. Laughs. Like I just said the funniest thing in the world. Then, with this completely dismissive tone, he says, "Oh, don't worry about it. Oh. Don't. Worry. About. It." Something inside me snaps. If he is going to pretend money is not real, then so will I. I stop Venmoing him my share of anything. Internet? Nope. Power? Not my problem. I do not mention it, do not bring it up, do not give him any kind of warning. I just stop paying. I do not even feel bad about it. At first, I expect him to notice immediately, to come knocking on my door asking what is going on. I imagine the conversation in my head, "Hey man, did you forget to send me your half?" To which I would reply, "Oh, don't worry about it." But nothing happens. The first bill comes and goes, and he says nothing. The second bill? Nothing. I keep waiting for him to bring it up, to get frustrated, to finally understand what it feels like to be the one covering for someone else. But he does not. Instead of confronting me, instead of even asking a single question, he just pays everything himself. No complaints, no passive-aggressive comments, no, "Hey man, did you forget?" Just full-on covers all the bills like it is nothing. And the crazy part? He keeps buying stupid things. More games, more takeout, more random Amazon packages. He does not even seem to notice that I have stopped paying. I should feel guilty, right? I should feel like a terrible person for taking advantage of this situation. Except, I don't. If he can drop $500 plus on a console, he can float our utilities for a while. Update 1. So, turns out, I was being a massive idiot. The PlayStation? He won it in a raffle. I find this out in the most humiliating way possible, completely out of the blue, while casually standing in our kitchen, making a sandwich. I'm focused on spreading peanut butter across my bread, zoning out after a long day, when our neighbor Ryan strolls in like he practically lives here. He leans against the counter, casual as anything, and says, "Yo, Jake. That raffle win was sick. I never win anything like that." The knife in my hand pauses mid-spread. My brain stutters, like a skipped beat in a song. Raffle win? My eyes flick over to Jake, expecting some kind of correction, some detail that makes this make sense, but all he does is nod and grin, like this is old news. Like this isn't a bomb going off in my head. My eyes shift to the PlayStation sitting proudly in the entertainment center, wires neatly plugged in, controllers stacked on the coffee table. The same PlayStation I had been silently fuming about for weeks. I feel heat creeping up the back of my neck. A raffle win. The PlayStation, the thing that had been fueling my quiet revenge, the justification for my refusal to pay my share of the bills, the entire foundation of my righteous anger, wasn't something he had irresponsibly dropped money on. It had been free. Just dumb luck. And I had spent over a month thinking I was proving a point, all based on something that didn't even happen the way I thought it did. At this point, I'm feeling a little bad. But not entirely, because he still owed me money. That didn't change. The water bill was still real. My Venmo request was still sitting there, unanswered. He had still come to me with that shrug, asking me to cover for him like it was no big deal. So, while the PlayStation itself was off the hook, the real problem still remained. And now, a new question was worming its way into my brain, and this one wouldn't let go. If he didn't drop hundreds on the PlayStation, then where the hell did his money go? Because there was still something missing here. If he had the kind of financial cushion that let him completely ignore my missing payments, if he was still living comfortably enough to keep ordering takeout, to keep buying new games and random Amazon gadgets, then what had changed last month? Why was he suddenly too broke for the water bill? What happened between then and now? Because something didn't add up, and the more I thought about it, the worse the feeling in my gut got. I tell myself not to care. It's not my business. Jake's finances are his problem, not mine. He can do whatever he wants with his money, make whatever dumb choices he wants, and as long as he pays his share, it shouldn't matter to me. But I also can't ignore the fact that I have been living rent-free for over a month now, waiting for him to notice that I stopped paying my half of the bills. And the longer he goes without saying anything, the weirder it feels. At first, I told myself he just hadn't noticed yet. That he wasn't keeping track of when I sent my payments, that he was coasting along, unaware that I had checked out of this financial arrangement entirely. But after a while, that explanation stopped making sense. Because he was still paying. Still covering everyone with his money. Turns out, I was not prepared for the answer. Jake finally notices that I haven't paid him back for the bills. Not because he's struggling or even irritated about it, but because he's confused. I see it in his face when he finally asks me, like it genuinely just occurred to him to check. "Hey man, did you forget to send your share for the bills?" The question is so casual, so completely without any trace of stress or frustration, that it throws me off. He doesn't sound like a guy who's been quietly fuming, who's been waiting for me to pull my weight. He sounds like someone who just now realized something was off. And suddenly, I don't feel like playing games anymore. I'm tired of the guessing, the assumptions, the waiting to see how long this will go on. I just flat out ask, what happened to the money you didn't use on the PlayStation? Because that's the real mystery here. If he didn't spend it on the console, and he obviously has enough to cover the bills, then where the hell did it go? Jake, without hesitation, without an ounce of shame or self-awareness, says, "Oh, I signed up for a personal finance coach." A what? I feel like I misheard him, like my brain refuses to process the words in the order he just said them. A finance coach. This man, who has never once in his life shown the slightest bit of financial responsibility, who eats takeout 5 times a week and impulse buys nonsense off Instagram ads, suddenly decided to invest in personal finance. Before I can even wrap my head around it, he keeps talking, like he's just dropping a completely normal, rational explanation for everything. Yes, bro. It's this program that teaches you how to take control of your wealth mindset. It's $300 a month, but you gotta spend money to make money. My entire body goes still. I don't even know how to respond. I look at him, at this man who, just a month ago, couldn't come up with $40 for a utility bill, and I realize that he is dead serious. He truly believes what he's saying. Like some finance guru got into his head and convinced him that throwing away hundreds of dollars a month on advice was the path to financial freedom. And here I was, thinking I had won this silent battle. Thinking I had some upper hand in this ridiculous situation. But no. I had been playing checkers while Jake was off losing chess games he paid to enter. I was shocked. Update 2. So, naturally, I had to ask, what exactly has this finance coach taught you so far? Because at this point, I needed to know. I needed to understand the logic, if there was any, behind the fact that this man, who could not scrape together $40 for the water bill, was suddenly a devoted student of financial wisdom. I had seen Jake make some dumb purchases before, watched him throw money at things he didn't need, but this was a whole new level. It wasn't just spending recklessly anymore. It was strategic recklessness, disguised as self-improvement. And I was genuinely curious how he justified it to himself. What was he getting in return? What golden piece of advice had been worth him deciding that basic utilities could wait? Jake, completely serious, leans back on the couch, stretching like he has just cracked the code to life itself, and says, "It's all about shifting your mindset, bro. Money isn't real. Debt isn't real. It's all energy, and you have to align yourself with abundance." I swear, my brain short-circuits for a second. I just stare at him, trying to process whether or not I actually just heard those words come out of his mouth. Money isn't real. Debt isn't real. Energy. What the hell was he talking about? This was the same guy who used to Venmo request me for his share of a $12 pizza down to the exact cent. And now, suddenly, money was just a concept. I blink. I wait. I expect him to start laughing, to admit this is some kind of elaborate joke, some weird attempt at trolling me. But no. He looks at me like he has just dropped the most profound truth in the universe, like I should be thanking him for letting me in on the secret. Like he's enlightened now. This man, who not too long ago stood in front of me shrugging about not having enough for utilities, is now confidently explaining that money is an illusion. And the thing is, I wish I could tell you he was joking. I wish I could say this was one of those moments where Jake was just being dramatic for fun, pushing a bit too far for the sake of a reaction. But he wasn't. He was completely, unquestionably, serious. I push further, because surely, there is something more to this. Some kind of actual strategy, a tangible plan, a financial principle that makes even a little bit of sense. I refuse to believe he is paying someone $300 a month just to be told to vibe his way into financial stability. I ask, okay, but like, actual financial strategies? Budgeting? Savings plans? He doesn't even hesitate. He shrugs, completely unbothered, and says, "That's outdated thinking, dude. Outdated thinking. Outdated thinking." The same man who has, on multiple occasions, needed to scavenge for spare change in the couch cushions to cover his part of a fast food run is now out here saying that budgeting is outdated? That savings plans, the literal foundation of every sane person's financial stability, are no longer relevant. The absolute audacity. And right then, two very important realizations hit me at the same time. 1. Jake has absolutely been scammed. 2. I am never seeing that water bill money again. It all comes together in an instant. This finance coach, the one he is paying an absurd $300 a month for, is the reason he was suddenly too broke last month. Not an emergency. Not bad luck. No sudden, unexpected expense that forced his hand. No, Jake had looked at his finances, saw that he had enough for basic necessities, and then made the conscious decision to hand over a giant chunk of it to some scam artist whispering sweet nothings about abundance and wealth attraction. And then, after making that brilliant financial move, he turned to me to cover the essentials. I should have been mad. And, to be fair, I was a little mad. But mostly, I was baffled. How did we get here? How did a person, who already had no concept of financial responsibility, manage to take the one step toward fixing his situation and somehow make everything worse? Because here's the thing, Jake was not suddenly struggling because he lost his job. He was not buried in unavoidable debt, nor was he dealing with some catastrophe that had blindsided him. He had done this to himself. He had looked at his finances, decided he needed to make a change, and instead of doing literally anything else, he chose to funnel $300 a month into a program that told him budgeting was outdated and debt was imaginary. And the most painful part? He believed it. I sat there, watching him, listening as he continued rambling about financial energy and wealth vibrations, and I realized something else. He fully, completely bought into this. He was all in on whatever nonsense this coach was feeding him. And if I tried to argue, if I tried to lay out cold, hard logic in front of him, he wasn't going to listen. He was going to dismiss me as someone who was still stuck in the old way of thinking about money, someone who just didn't get it. This wasn't a case of him being in denial about his own spending habits. No, Jake thought he was doing something revolutionary. He thought he had unlocked some higher level of financial consciousness that the rest of us just weren't ready to understand. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't worried. He wasn't even remotely concerned about the fact that he had literally lost money in the process of learning how to get better with money. He had fallen into one of the dumbest financial traps imaginable, and instead of panicking, instead of realizing he had made a massive mistake, he was treating it like some grand investment into his future. So now, I had a choice. Do I tell him he's getting played? Do I lay out all the ways in which he is being manipulated, try to shake some sense into him before he throws away even more money? Do I demand my money back, force the issue until he acknowledges that he put me in a position where I had to cover for him while he threw cash into the void? I considered all of those options. But then I remembered, I had been living rent-free for over a month. So instead, I just nodded and said, yeah, man. Sounds like you're really onto something. Update 3. It took another 2 weeks before Jake finally realized something was wrong. 2 weeks of him living his life in blissful ignorance, still coasting along as if nothing had changed, as if the invisible hand of the universe was just magically keeping his bills paid and his fridge stocked. But the thing about reality is that it always catches up with you. And for Jake, reality came crashing down on a random Tuesday evening when I walked through the door and found him sitting on the couch, staring at his laptop with a deep frown. He looked up at me, confusion written all over his face, and said, "Dude. I just checked my account. Why is my balance so low?" I just stood there, watching him, waiting for the gears in his head to start turning. Because really, how did he think this was going to end? He had been covering everything, the internet, the electric bill, the rent, all on his own, and somehow, it had never once occurred to him to wonder where his money was going. I stared at him for a second before saying, "Because you've been paying for everything by yourself for the past month and a half." His face went completely blank, like I had just spoken to him in some ancient, long-forgotten language. It was the expression of a man who had, up until this moment, genuinely believed he had discovered some loophole in the system, some secret to life that the rest of us were too blind to see. And now, he was finally realizing that the system was working exactly as intended, he had just been too dense to notice. He pulled up his bank transactions, scrolling through them with increasing panic, and I watched as his expression shifted from mild confusion to full-blown horror. The internet bill. The electric bill. The rent. One by one, each transaction was a slap to the face, a reminder that money is, in fact, very real. His head snapped up, and his voice was practically a gasp. "Why didn't you say anything?" I shrugged. "Oh, don't worry about it." The exact same words he had thrown at me when I asked about the PlayStation. The exact same dismissive, carefree attitude he had when I was covering his bill. And now, he looked like he was about to pass out. He sat there, stunned, his hands still frozen over his laptop keyboard, and I could almost see the spiral happening in real time. The frantic mental math. The desperate attempt to figure out how much money he had left, how much he had lost, how much he needed to survive the rest of the month. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get better, he let out an actual groan and dropped his head into his hands. "Dude, I can't afford this. My finance coach said I need to stop tracking my expenses and just trust the process." I raised an eyebrow. "Well, how's that working out for you?" Spoiler alert, not well. Turns out, his little, wealth mindset experiment had left him nearly broke, and it was only now, with no safety net, that it finally hit him all at once. He immediately started panicking, pulling up his emails, trying to figure out how much damage he had done. And the best part? He couldn't even cancel the finance coaching subscription. Apparently, it was a non-refundable 6-month commitment. I stood there, arms crossed, watching him scroll frantically through his emails like he was expecting to find an escape hatch hidden somewhere in the fine print. But there wasn't one. He had signed himself up for 6 whole months of financial nonsense, and there was no backing out now. He had willingly locked himself into a $1,800 scam, and it had taken him less than 2 months to realize he was completely and utterly screwed. At this point, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Because yeah, it was painful to watch him come to terms with how deep he had dug himself into this hole, but at the same time, he did this to himself. He had ignored every basic financial principle, dismissed every reasonable attempt at logic, and fully convinced himself that money was just energy instead of an actual, tangible resource that you had to manage properly. And now, he was paying the price for it, literally. But then, in the middle of his panicked scrolling, he looked up at me, his face full of desperation, and asked, "Can you cover me for rent this month?" And that was the moment I completely lost it. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I wasn't even trying to be mean, but come on. This man, who had been blindly throwing away hundreds of dollars a month on financial snake oil, was now sitting here, staring at me like I was his last lifeline. I wiped actual tears from my eyes and said, "Jake. My guy. My dude. I have literally been covering you for the past month and a half. Welcome to reality." That was the moment it finally clicked for him. The realization that, no, money isn't energy. That bills are very much real. That you can't just manifest financial stability by throwing cash at a scam. That if you decide to spend hundreds of dollars on financial coaching instead of, paying your rent, there are actual consequences. And I wish I could say he took it well. That he nodded, accepted his mistakes, and immediately made a plan to fix them. But no. He sat there for a long time, staring blankly at his screen, cycling through all the stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, the whole process, right in front of me. He tried to argue that it wasn't really his fault, that the program had sounded legit, that no one had told him it was a scam. And I just sat there, watching, waiting, letting him work through it on his own, because there was nothing I could say that reality hadn't already said for me. So what ended up happening? Well, Jake had to call his parents for help. And let's just say, they were not happy. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he had made questionable financial decisions, and this was the final straw for them. His dad told him to figure it out himself. His mom sighed and told him to cancel the takeout orders for once in his life. There was no sympathy. No bailout. Just pure, unfiltered parental disappointment. As for me, I went right back to paying my half of the bills, and Jake. He's now on a strict budget. No more gadgets. No more unnecessary takeout. And definitely no more $300 a month wealth coaching.